The pursuit of knowledge is something of a lost art within the Imperium of Man. The amount of intellectual regression over the millennia is likely staggering. There are those groups who do seek it, of course, most notably within the Inquisition or the Adeptus Mechanicus, but it is one of the Adeptus Astartes groups that we shall discuss today. In truth, their quest for knowledge is both external and internal, as their origins and history have been all but lost for reasons unknown. As a result, they are perhaps one of the most mysterious groups of Space Marines, and the nature of their quest, along with their actions undertaking it, have not been lost on a few suspicious minds. Whatever their origin and however they act, the fact remains that they are loyal to the Emperor, even going so far as to venerate the Master of Mankind in the absence of a Primarch. Hailing from a homeworld unknown, they are the Spacebound Chapter led by Chapter Master Gabriel Angelos. Whoever and wherever they came from, they are known today as the Bloodravens, and this is what we know of them. This is Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. The chapter known as the Bloodravens have detailed records of its history dating back to M37. However, fragmented Imperial records suggest the chapter is much older, despite the fact that there is literally nothing in the Bloodravens' own history. This suggests that for reasons unknown, someone wiped the chapter's history at some point, and I suspect it wasn't the Bloodravens themselves, as not even the High Lords of Terror know about them. Most likely candidate is the Inquisition, but then why not destroy the Bloodravens entirely, as is their usual way? This means that the original homeworld and chapter master of the Bloodravens are both unknown, as well as, more interestingly, their primogenitor Primarch and Legion. As a result, there has been a not insignificant amount of speculation as to the gene father of the Bloodravens, and seemingly any investigation into the matter has come up with no evidence either way. I have no idea how, mind you, the Primarchs have pretty defined genetic traits. Said speculation has suggested a lot of primogenitors for the chapter. The Blood Angels due to the name and potentially colour scheme / heraldry, the Raven Guard for much the same reason, the Dark Angels just because, and the Imperial Fist due to the Ravens owning a power mace believed sculpted by Rogel Dorn himself, known as Rogel's Fist even though it's a mace. However, as none of those legions or chapters have come forward to claim ownership, I am unsure as to whether they are truly the sires of the Bloodravens. I mean, they could be and they've just become massively estranged, but especially for the Dark Angels and Blood Angels, I find it unlikely. However, perhaps the most interesting theory is that they are descendants of Magnus the Red and the Thousand Sons. Various pieces of evidence suggest this, some heraldic like their iconography, similar to that of the Corvidae cult of the old 15th Legion. However, there is a level of similarity in doctrine and mindset between the two. We'll explore this further in depth later, but both Ravens and Prosperines were renowned for their high numbers of psykers and their pursuit of knowledge. There is more, though it is circumstantial and lacking in solid evidence, but there is one final bit of evidence that might be most convincing of all if you subscribe to this theory. Prior to the burning of Prospero, historiographer and psyker Callista Eris had a rather powerful vision that forewarned of the coming Horus heresy and burning of Prospero. In it she spoke of the Raven of Blood, of lost sons seeking salvation and knowledge that is denied. Whether this is truly a mention of the Bloodravens is unclear, but it seems to be for sure. And yet we will likely never know of their origins unless new information comes to light, for good or for ill. Regardless of their origins, the Bloodravens have pressed on in loyal service to the Imperium for the past 4,000 years, by their own records, or longer if the fragments of Imperial history are to be believed. Due to the mystery surrounding their past, the chapter have become meticulous at logging their own history, even going so far as populating their ships with curators to record everything that happens on board. These records, including detailed mission statements of chapter librarians, are copied into the Librarium Sanctorum aboard their flagship, thought to be one of the best repositories of information in the Imperium. Whether they will be able to unearth their own history remains to be seen, although we will see a little about that later. But their zeal in hunting down relics etc. suggests that if the truth is out there, and worth knowing, the Bloodravens will almost certainly find it one day. Their hunt for knowledge also stretches beyond that of themselves, and the Bloodravens have become fast friends with the Adeptus Mechanicus and their explorator fleet, with whom the chapter have travelled and worked several times. This means that not only have the Bloodravens been attempting to log and recover their own history, they have also helped to expand the Imperium's horizons in terms of both occupied territory and information available. In the absence of a Primarch, who is often a focus of veneration for the Astartes, the Blood Angels and Sanguinius being a fantastic example, the Bloodravens instead venerate the Emperor of Mankind exclusively. It is unclear whether this veneration of the Lord of Mankind crosses into worship, which will make the Bloodravens followers of the Imperial Creed, but in either event, one must still be proud of their continued loyalty. After all, when you have no one save yourself to truly call brother or even cousin, it can possibly be an isolating existence, but for the most part, they seem to handle it fine. Well, I say that, they've actually had at least one confirmed instance of members going traitor, but we'll get to that a little later on. For now, let me just say that the Inquisition has a level of distrust toward the Bloodravens beyond what is typical, though that may be due to some of their other habits, rather than their history both known and unknown. But you see, all that relic hunting I mentioned earlier isn't simply limited to just ones believed to be theirs or the Imperium's. The Inquisition takes issue with the chapter's acquisition of Chaos relics for study, or just to stop the forces of the Ruinous Powers having them, if nothing else. They claim to destroy said artifacts after they're done with them, but the Inquisition don't believe them, and in truth, I'm not sure if I do either. I mean, I want to believe them since they obviously don't hand them over to their other authorities, but given their thirst for knowledge, I have a funny feeling the Bloodravens may have pulled a Relictors and tried to use the artifacts to learn even more from them, though without being as blatant as the Relictors who actually use what they find on the battlefield and went renegade as a result. The Bloodravens are, for the most part, a Codex-compliant chapter, though there are a couple of notable exceptions to this. For starters, though it isn't a Codex Devians per se, they have no homeworld for one reason or another. Given their missing history, I can't speculate when or why they became fleet-based. They may well have never had a homeworld at all. This makes them a crusading chapter due to their fleet-based nature, with their flagship being the battle barge Omnis Arcanum, though you might say their crusade is one of knowledge rather than conquest, or at least alongside it. Their overall structure is that of a typical chapter. 10 companies, command structure, the usual. There is one difference though. The Librarian. Every single vessel in the Bloodravens fleet has a Librarian, and the chapter itself has a much larger cadre of Librarians than a typical chapter. This in turn implies that the Bloodravens are highly psychic by the standards of the Astartes, which is further evidence of there being Thousand Sun successes if you want to go that way, but whatever the reason for this high percentage of psychic battle brothers, it is both a boon and a detriment to them. On the downside, they are likely more susceptible to the Immaterian's corruption than others, though they counter this through strenuous internal monitoring both on their own recruits and on veterans, executing and or studying those who slip to both ensure no further corruption and so they try to learn from it to avoid a repeat. However, the higher number of librarians will of course aid in their studies of chaos and other things, but on campaign they form a linchpin of Bloodraven tactical doctrine. Said doctrine revolves around patience, planning, and surgical strikes, ensuring that their plan made needs no deviation and that the war is clinically won. Though perhaps it is not the typical Space Marine way, as Astartes are often seen as getting stuck straight into the thickest part of the fighting, the Bloodravens will instead wait and analyse from orbit. The Librarians become prediction tools, working out things such as enemy movements in meticulous detail, ensuring every little thing is counted for before the final plan is made. Once said final plan is finalised, that's it, no changes, followed to the letter until the job is done. Such is the skill in this planning and preparation, the Bloodravens are able to outpredict their adversaries and strike with seemingly prescient abilities, and this means that many of their campaigns once started generally do not take very long to resolve. This does come with one drawback if they work with allies, however, as their seeming unwillingness to engage until ready is often perceived as cowardice by other Imperial forces. When they do join the fight though, they make their additional psychic potential work for them once again. I have heard tell of battle squads composed solely of librarians, such as their number it seems within the chapter, and this must make them a devastating force if the old 15th was anything to go by. This larger contingent of librarians will also cross over into the command structure of the Bloodravens, and it is not uncommon for them to become actual commanders at the same time as having a position within the Librarium. Said commanders are known collectively as the Secret Masters, though the overall command structure and roles of these members is, as their name might suggest, rather secret. There is in truth very little to add regarding the structure or preferences of the Bloodravens, though it is probably worth noting that despite their ties to the Mechanicus and the Explorator fleet, their tech marines are not particularly renowned, nor do they utilise much cybernetics or unique technology unless you count the relics they recover. There is one quirk to them that I wish to mention before moving on though, that of their 5th company. Though structured and run like a typical battle company, their iconography is an oddity. For reasons unknown, the entire 5th company wears symbols of penitence and redemption upon their armour. Though, as stated, none know why, speculation is rife regarding the matter. Some might suggest it is due to the official tale of events in M38 that the entire company was lost in the warp, but that just doesn't add up. Why would the warriors of today have to repent for a freak accident that claimed the lives of those of the past? However, some say that a librarian attached to the company turned traitor seduced by chaos, and perhaps they pulled the 5th company with them? If true, it might reinforce the reasons for that stringent testing they undertake, but whatever the case, the Bloodravens will almost certainly never speak of it, and certainly not to outsiders. The modern 5th company are nicknamed the Fated, but what exactly that stands for I am unsure, and to be truthful, I don't really want to speculate. I mean, everyone has quirks with their titles. Maybe we'll learn someday. The Bloodravens have fought the galaxy over, especially around its fringes alongside the various explorator fleets we mentioned earlier. However, though we will get to their most famous campaigns a little later, I wish to quickly mention one of the engagements in the Sabbat Worlds Crusade on the world of Solipsis. Though it had originally been imperial, forming a useful source of resources for the Crusade, the governor of Solipsis began to fall into the grip of chaos until the Imperium, including a force of Bloodravens, was forced to mobilise en masse to stop it. Details of the campaign are murky, but control of the various battle zones swung back and forth in an intense fight. Ultimately, however, the Loyalists won. Well, sort of. The traitors ultimately withdrew as the Imperium held a slim advantage at the close, but they made the citizens pay on their way out, and it was regarded by all who remained as Pyrrhic, especially after the Hrud infestation sprung up. However, the Bloodravens have been involved in a series of rather famous, or infamous depending on opinions, campaigns, starting on the now destroyed world of Tartarus. The Bloodravens had been to the planet millennia before, recovering a shard of an avatar of Cain's wailing doom. But in late M41, a demon prince imprisoned within an object called the Maledictum, no relation to the Cicatrix Maledictum, began to awaken. At the same time and in the run-up to this, orcs had been proving a rather major nuisance, goaded by Alpha Legion agents as a distraction whilst the traitors attempted to uncover the Maledictum that was starting to corrupt the populace. The Bloodravens arrived to combat the Greenskins, eventually uncovering the link between Xeno and Traitor. But despite the urging/demand of the Inquisition to evacuate in the face of an oncoming warp storm, they refused to leave. They would eventually skirmish with Eldari of Craftworld Bieltan, who had returned to Tartarus after initially sealing the Demon Prince away long ago. But as things began to go south, Imperium and Eldari allied to take it to the forces of Chaos. They succeeded, ultimately killing the Chaos Lord of the Alpha Legion, who had himself become a Demon Prince using the Maledictum's power. But the Bloodravens' commander, more on him later, would actually destroy the Maledictum, releasing the Demon Prince in an attempt to kill it. This forced both Eldari and Imperial to evacuate, with the Demon Prince thanking the Bloodravens for accidentally sacrificing so many orcs to it in the earlier phases of the war. Later, though they had barely been present in the battle on the planet of Lorn 5, the Bloodravens ended up embroiled in a conflict that involved the fallout from that war. They, along with Astra Militarum, Eldari, Tau, Orcs, Necrons, and Chaos Marines, fought on the tomb world of Cronus in a huge multi-faction war that even saw the two Imperial elements squared off against one another due to being unwilling to deviate from their orders. Guess that never changed the plan thing the Ravens have can't always be a good thing. The main objective of the Astartes was the securing of relics potentially belonging to their forebears, along with of course wiping out those who opposed them. and they would ultimately succeed in this endeavour. The victory did not go unnoticed by others. The survivors of the Guard forces, though treated fairly following their defeat, would harbour a deep hatred for the Bloodravens, and the Inquisition would arrive to interrogate the Astartes about their actions. Later on, the Bloodravens would return to the Lithesh sector of Ultima Segmentum, the sector in which Cronus was, to fight in another of its systems in another multi-faction war. This battle spanned the entirety of said system and is known as the Kaurava conflict, and once again the inability to deviate from orders saw the Astartes pitted against other Imperials, both from the Astra Militarum and the Adeptus Sororitas this time. Further demonstration of the escalation compared to Cronus was the presence of Drakari as well as the previous factions, and rather than 3 companies, the Bloodravens instead committed a full half the chapter to their securing of knowledge. However, this one, well, it didn't go so well. Though it is unclear exactly which faction was responsible for it, the Bloodravens and their base in the northern continent of Kaurava II were eventually overrun and wiped out. Such as the severity of this defeat, it is regarded as a great shame upon the chapter by some, no surprise given the amount of damage it did to their strength. Said strength was not even replenished the next time the Bloodravens were thrown into a major engagement a little closer to home than they would have liked. I say home quote unquote because of course they have no home planet, but the subsector Aurelia is sort of under their protection and is used for recruitment purposes. This meant that, when the subsector came under attack from Orcs, the understrength Ravens were forced to respond and try and protect their interests. It was eventually uncovered that once again the Orcs were being manipulated by an outside faction, in this case the Eldari for reasons unknown, and worse still, it was also discovered a splinter of a Tyranid hive fleet was en route to consume the system. This effectively forced the Astartes into a delaying stratagem, trying to keep the subsector going until the rest of the chapter could arrive, and unbelievably, they managed to pull it off despite the loss of many astropaths and librarians to the psychic will of the hive mind. However, even though seemingly the Tyranids were defeated or at least held up, that wasn't the end for subsector Aurelia, as the planet that gave it its name reappeared after being lost in the warp for an indeterminate time. It did not come alone though, as the Black Legion Chaos Space Marines arrived, led by the Chaos Lord, thought slain on Cronus. As if the situation couldn't get any worse, this was also the moment at which a deep-rooted corruption within the Bloodravens was revealed, with the chapter master and chief librarian, who due to the unique nature of the chapter was in fact the same individual in this case, was shown to be a traitor, declaring those who would not follow his orders to withdraw from Aurelia as heretics. This started a decade-long civil war within the chapter, running from the Second Aurelian Crusade, the Black Legion's arrival, to the third and final one. The multi-faction carnage unleashed on the subsector forced the hand of the Inquisition, who declared an exterminatus on the entire region. This caused every faction to enter something of a race against the clock, trying to defeat the other factions before the Inquisition arrived, and when it was revealed, stopped the ascension of the corrupted chapter master to demonhood using the exterminatus as a mass sacrifice. After accidentally accelerating the arrival of the Inquisition by destroying an Eldari ritual designed to hold them up, the loyalist Bloodravens headed to the world of Cyrene that had previously been destroyed by exterminatus and so would not have been targeted again. There they confronted their traitorous brethren and their former chapter master, who had actually been corrupted by the demon of the Maledictum unleashed on Tartarus all those years ago. The final battle took partway through the ascension to a demon of corn, which is odd for a librarian, but there you go. But ultimately, the loyalists were victorious, defeating their former leader on Cyrene. They then contacted the Inquisition to call off the exterminatus, assumingly the other factions were beaten back or destroyed before this race to Cyrene, and after finally purging their ranks, they were left to rebuild. Yeah, the Inquisition let them live. I'm slightly surprised, if I'm honest, because that's just not how the Inquisition works, if I'm honest. Due to their short-known history, there are very few heroes within the Bloodravens not involved in the conflicts I discussed earlier, but there is one in particular who may be the most revered amongst at least the Astartes. Azariah Vidya is known to the Bloodravens as the Great Father or the Seeker of Truth, originally chief librarian of the chapter during a war in the Gothic sector in M37, so pretty early in that recorded history, truth be told. This campaign was incredibly costly to the chapter, with both Chapter Master and Master of the Chaplaincy being killed along with many warriors. Either by choice or request, Vidya took command of the chapter and perhaps the whole campaign, implementing the tactics of analysis, planning, and prediction that the Bloodravens are now famous for. Seemingly striking at nothing, he was able to bring the campaign to a close whilst conserving the Bloodravens and the Astra Militarum forces, his psychic abilities paying dividends over and over. In deference to his skill, the Secret Masters, or at least the ones I assume were still alive, asked Vidya to accept the office of Chapter Master on a more permanent basis, but unlike almost any other case I know of, he was permitted to maintain his posting as Chief Librarian at the same time. Whether he was the first librarian to be placed in a command posting is unknown due to their history, but he was the first to be both Chapter Master and Chief Librarian at once, and he became rather legendary as a result. I'm actually curious how many more times it's happened since this. I know it's happened at least once more in the Aurelia Crusades, but we don't have the full picture. In more modern times, it would be remiss of me not to talk at some length about Chapter Master of the Bloodravens, an individual known as Gabriel Angelos. In a time before its destruction, Angelos was born on Cyrene before his recruitment into the Bloodravens. He would in fact be involved in its eventual death too, after returning there to oversee recruitment but finding a world where things were somewhat awry. There were unregistered psychers, a democratic government, and Xenos trading, and despite there being no evidence of corruption, it would be discovered that some political leaders had become disillusioned with the Imperium. Angelos, in perhaps an overzealous or overcautious response, called in the heavy hitters to deal with Cyrene, and the Inquisition and even the Grey Knights arrived to cleanse the world, Angelos even personally killing his own father. His first known command came as 3rd Company Captain on Tartarus, leading the Bloodravens against the Orcs and later the Maledictum, before smashing said Maledictum and unleashing the Demon Prince that would cause such havoc later. He next appeared treading a very dangerous line on Lorne 5, as despite the warnings of heresy, he aided the Eldari in retrieving a weapon via the Webway, defeating a Chaos Warband under Arzek Ahriman in the process. In fact, Angelos is rather known to the Eldari. According to Taldia, the Farseer present and then slain on Cronus, where Angelos wasn't for the record, he is Gabriel of the Hidden Heart, and some say he was a hope for the Eldari in human form. Weird, but whatever. Remaining as 3rd Company Captain, Angelos was not present for much of the First Aurelian Crusade due to conflict with the Tau, though he was part of the fleet that raced there and eventually saved the subsector, for the time being. During the Second Crusade, it was Angelos' refusal to withdraw that helped spark the schism within the Bloodravens, as the Chapter Master denounced him as a heretic for his actions. His full role in the civil war that followed is rather unknown, but he was massively involved in the finale as he came home to the dead Cyrene. He and his 3rd Company actually arrived separately from the main Bloodraven force, with Angelos going head-to-head with the traitor Chapter Master Azariah Kairos. Suffice it to say, it didn't go well for Gabriel. The Loyalist did triumph, but he lost, and by all rights he should have died after losing both legs and an arm and an eye and being left to die in the rubble. But his body was recovered and rebuilt with extensive bionics, and with Kairos dead, the chapter was rather lacking a leader. The mantle of Chapter Master fell upon Angelos, who has led the Bloodravens in their rebuilding process following their huge losses due to both death and treachery in Aurelia. Most recently, his campaigns have led the chapter to Acheron, getting involved in a 3-race scrap along with Orcs and Eldari once again. This time, however, the prize on offer was less the world itself, but rather the relic upon it, the Spear of Cain, said to be unbelievably powerful. And yet, as an Autarch recovered the spear, it was revealed to not in fact be linked so much to the bloody-handed god as to the actual blood god, as it was a trap that allowed the unleashing of a bloodthirster upon Acheron. This forced an alliance between all 3 factions, including the Farseer Angelos had allied with on Tartarus all that time ago, and the warboss from Lorne 5, Cronus and Kaurava, to try and stop the demons. But ultimately, it was to be a losing battle, and Angelos had a battle barge crash into the cracked surface of the planet to defeat the demonic threat. Yes, I know how crazy that sounds, especially given the limited strength of the Bloodravens after Aurelia, but it worked, and Acheron was destroyed whilst the commanders were teleported to safety, though the Orc did get the spear, don't ask. What Angelos and the Ravens have done since Acheron is unclear, but likely it has involved marshalling their still limited strength and pursuing their goals. In truth, whilst it may not be obvious from his campaigns, Angelos still shows these goals to some extent in his war gear. His primary weapon is a demon hammer of all things, containing a shard of the Wailing Doom recovered on Tartarus millennia ago and given to him by the Inquisition to use against the Maledictor. Finally, the other major commander I wish to discuss is perhaps less honoured and also yet more than Angelos in some ways. Davian Thule first came into recorded history on the world of Vesper, defeating a Chaos Witch who had corrupted the planet and even killed the leader of the crusade the Ravens had launched to stop her. After a period on Cadia against the Iron Warriors as 4th Company captain, Thule was placed in command of the 3 companies sent to Cronus, both to cleanse it of enemies and to secure the relics there. As we stated earlier, he was ultimately successful. Striking out from the northern reaches of the planet, Thule was able to see off all other factions on Cronus, most notably travelling below the surface to collapse the Necron tomb complex personally. It would cost him his eye to do so, but it was done, and such was Thule's renown from this and his other successes that he was made overall commander of Subsector Aurelia before Angelos arrived. However, it was later revealed that whatever he found on Cronus, he destroyed it. Apparently this included the true origins of the Bloodravens, making Thule perhaps the only person who knew and will ever know, as well as making me wonder what on earth he found. Unfortunately, the Tyranids invading Aurelia would prove to be Thule's undoing, as he was mortally poisoned beyond both him and the Apothecarian to heal, and he was placed into stasis. Through the collection of samples, an antidote was eventually concocted, but even then he had to be placed into a dreadnought chassis to preserve his life. After a bout of hazy memory and confusion, he proved to be incredibly useful to the Bloodravens in their defence of Aurelia, but by the time of the Civil War, it was very likely that Davian Thule had finally met his end. He squared off with Chaos Lord Eliphas the Inheritor, who he had defeated before on Cronus on one of the worlds in the subsector as the Inquisition moved in. Whether Eliphas or Exterminatus got him is unknown, but unless something truly spectacular happened, it is very likely that he died, and if he did, then perhaps the answer to the most important question in the history of the Bloodravens has died along with him. So end the tales of the Bloodravens. This is a chapter shrouded in mystery, both in terms of history and at times motivation, given they fought against other Imperial forces. But perhaps, on this one occasion, that is how it should be. If the knowledge of their past was uncovered then destroyed by one seeking it within their ranks, maybe it is best it remain hidden, lest it do more harm than good. As much as I wish I knew the truth so as to put the rumours and theories to rest, I cannot deny that regardless of their past, the Bloodravens have done very well with the hand history has dealt them. They may not be the most famous, though arguably they are among the most intriguing, but the work they have done for the Imperium in expanding its understanding and borders cannot be denied. In fact, that gives me an idea for something I want to do next time. It might be a rather short log by comparison to some, but I think it's only fair we look at the other great explorers within the Imperium. For now though, thank you for watching Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.